This video is going to show you how to find the market equilibrium on Excel, which is the preferred way to find the market equilibrium. So you'll be given a demand curve and a supply curve, and you have to find the market equilibrium and answer some other questions. So notice that the demand curve is Q equals negative 1/3 P plus 25/3, and since the P is on the right side, this P is the independent variable. It stands for price. So if we know the price, then the dependent variable Q, the quantity of items, will be known. So that's important to think about because that tells me that my A column is going to be P. And this is not written in function notation. It's just Q, but to keep it straight, I'm going to call this demand Q. I'm going to type my demand equation in column B, and then column C I'm going to call supply Q. And then this next D column is new. It's going to be called the difference. Okay, so remember P is my domain, my independent variables, and I get to pick what I want to put in here. My column B, demand Q column, that's where the demand equation is going to go in. And so we start with equals. We don't type the Q in. This is what Q equals negative 1 divided by 3 times P. So we'll click on cell A2 plus 25/3. And then hit enter. And it gave me a value because it thinks 0 is here. And then my supply equation is equals 1/5 times A2 minus 13/5. And just very quickly, I wanted to show you that the first equation I used a bunch of parentheses. The second equation I did not. That's because Excel does understand order of operations, so it knows to divide the 1/5 before it multiplies by A2, because you use division and multiplication from left to right. So it understands that, and it knows to divide 13 by 5 before it subtracts, because you divide before you subtract. So you didn't need the parentheses, and I wanted to point that out. Okay, so I have my demand equation in, I have my supply equation in, and the market equilibrium, if you'll remember, is when these two equal each other. So with Excel, instead of setting these two equal to each other, what we can do is know that if they are equal to each other, then if I subtract the two, you're going to have a difference of 0. So what I'm going to do is type in equals, and I'm going to do my supply equation minus my difference equation, my demand equation. Now you could do demand minus supply. I like to do supply minus demand because of something called shortage and surplus that we're going to answer, and I like for my supply minus demand equation to mean something. So I'll tell you that in a minute. Okay, so now I'm going to drag this down, but I really should probably put some values in for P, and you get to pick. So it's hard to pick because you don't know what this item is, but if you read the questions, it says find the demand when the price is 16. What quantity would be required for the supply price to be 20? So that kind of tells me about what my value should be, and I'm going to count by 5s. And I'm going to drag these have formulas in them, so I'm going to drag it down once using the fill handle. Then I'm going to pick up all 4 columns and count by 5s. Now you don't have to count by 5s. We could go and count by 2s. So if I want to change it, I can do that. Okay, so now I can see that my difference is negative, and it stays negative, which means I need to keep increasing my domain. And see right here where it turns from negative difference to a positive difference, that tells me my market equilibrium is somewhere in between 20 and 22. So the way you find market equilibrium is, let's drag this down one more time, is you use goal seek. And so we want this difference column to be 0. If the difference column is 0, then that's the market equilibrium. So goal seek, I'm going to click on this 2.4 here. This is cell D15, and I'm going to go to data, what if analysis, goal seek, and D15 is already there, so that's good, and I want D15 column to go to 0 by changing cell. And what you have to do is you have to go all the way back to our P column and select A15, because P is in this formula in column B, and P is in this formula in column C, and column D has the formulas from C and B in them. So you need to go all the way back to your independent variable P. Okay, and so here it is. The difference is 0 when the price is $20.50 and the quantity is 1.5. The quantity of items is 1.5. Now this is just an exercise, so don't worry about the decimal. We can talk about units and things at another time. But that's your market equilibrium. Then we've got more questions. Question 1, find the demand when the price is 16. So here is my price, and so my quantity of demand here is 3. Question 2, find the demand price when the quantity is 5 units. So it says demand price, so that means I'm going to look in the demand column, and the quantity is 5 units, so that means that the demand price is 10. And then question 4 we've already done, find the equilibrium quantity, which would be 1.5 items, and the equilibrium price, which would be $20.50. Okay, so I've gone over to the key, and I just wanted to show you where I've written out. This is what your work should look like when you write out the answer. So question 1, the demand quantity is 3 items, and then I forgot to answer the second part. The supply quantity right here would be 0.6 items. And then you can read question 2, 3, and 4. But I also wanted to talk to you about a couple other terms. We could ask you whether there was a surplus or shortage of goods. So for example, right here, if the price is $10, then the demand, people want 5 items, but the supply is only at negative 0.6 items, so the difference is a negative 5.6. So that would mean that there is a shortage when the price is set at $10, which makes sense because the market equilibrium price is $20.50, so that's way cheaper. So we have a run on the items and there's not enough. And that's why I always do supply minus demand, because the negative number to me means that there's a shortage of items. And then if we look, for example, at this one, if you sold this item for $21, then 1.33 items would be wanted, but you'd have 1.6 items in supply, and so the difference would be a positive 0.267, and so that would mean that there is a surplus. Okay, so example 2, we have again different notation. You have Q sub D, and that just means if you look over here on the right hand side, you have P. So since P's being multiplied by negative 28.57, P is your independent variable. It stands for price, and so your Q is your dependent variable, and that Q sub D just means quantity of demand. So you may see that notation. Then you have your supply equation, which is quantity of supply. And we're supposed to find the market equilibrium, price and quantity, and then answer for what quantities and prices would there be a shortage, and what quantity and prices would there be a surplus. So I would pause the video and do this problem on your own, and then come back and check your answers with the key. Okay, so you can see I labeled my independent variable price, and then I have a demand column, a supply column, and a difference column, and I did supply minus demand. I put in my demand equation, my supply equation, and my difference was this C2 minus B2. And then I picked a domain. I just decided to use 0 to 10, and I dragged all four of these down. And what I'm doing to see if that's a good set of numbers to use, I just looked at my difference column and made sure I had some negative numbers and some positive numbers. And I know that right here where it changes from negative to positive is where my market equilibrium is located. And so to find the market equilibrium, I dragged this down an extra line, and then I clicked on cell D13 and went to Data, What If Analysis, Goal Seek, and I want to change that to 0 by changing the independent variable way over here to the left, cell A13, and got that. So what is this? Well, this is price. So when the price is $4.22, the quantity of items would be 27.997, and that is my market equilibrium. And then the question is about shortage and surplus. So what you can do is, the answer is 4.22. You can insert it in here. It's kind of nice to be able to do this. So what you do is click on the row. So click on the 7 and then right click and then insert. And so you can put 4.22 in here, or you can actually just goal seek it to get it more exact. And I'm doing this just to demonstrate that anything lower than 4.22 as a price is a shortage. And any price higher than $4.22 is going to be a surplus. And you can see by the positive numbers. And you can look here, right here, there are 91.43 items in demand, but only 3.33 items in supply. So that's a shortage. So to answer the question, you wouldn't put just individual numbers. You would use a phrase like less than. So if the price is less than $4.22, there's going to be a shortage. And if the price is greater than $4.22, there would be a surplus. The final thing I want to show you is you can actually graph both of the demand curve and the supply curve. Excel is pretty smart. So if you grab these three columns here, it's going to just default to understand that this is my independent variable and this is my dependent variable, and it'll graph this line. And then price is my independent variable and supply is my dependent variable, and it'll graph that line. And so it understands that P is the independent variable for both of them. And then it even kind of labels it. These blue dots are my demand ordered pairs, and these red dots are my supply order pairs. And you can actually even hover over one. That point right there is the point 7, comma, negative 51.42, and you can see that right here. And if I hover over a red point, that's the point 8, 69.99. That's this point right here. Okay, so let's see what else Excel can do. This type of problem is a little different. I didn't give you the equations. It says Charlie's Chocoholic Factory has done some research. Charlie can sell 500 chocolate bars at a price of 50 cents each, and 385 bars at a price of 75 cents each. Charlie's supplier is willing to supply as many as 600 for a price of 62 cents each, or a maximum of 285 bars for 46 cents each. Find the market equilibrium, price, and quantity. If the quantity is 300 chocolate bars, will there be a shortage or a surplus of chocolate bars? Okay, so this problem is difficult because you're not given equations. You're only given what I hope you can recognize as some ordered pairs. And you have price and you have quantity. So really step one is to think about that and write that down. We're going to let P equal price and Q equal quantity. Now right here I've done some thinking and I have to decide what do I want to let be the independent variable and what do I want to let be the dependent variable. And so far in this class, P, the price, has always been the independent variable, although it may not always be that. But since that's what we know and it makes sense that the price determines the quantity, we're going to set the ordered pairs up so that they all are price first and then quantity. Okay, so then I'm going to read through this and make sure that I write my order pairs correctly because we're trying to trick you kind of. It says Charlie can sell 500, that's a quantity, chocolate bars at a price of 50 cents and 385 bars at a price of 75 cents each. So when I write this on my paper if I were you, when I write it down, the demand ordered pairs, because selling is people buying things, the demand ordered pairs would be the 0.5 first in the P spot, comma 500 second, that's in the Q spot. So we have the order pairs 0.5, 500, and 0.75, 385. Then it says that his supplier is willing to supply as many as 600 for a price of 62 cents each, or 285 bars for 46 cents each. So again, you have to be making sure that you put things in the right order. So my supply order pairs, P is 0.62 at Q equals 600, and 0.46 is P at 285 is my Q. So now what I'm going to do is going to remember that my independent variable is P. I have a demand Q and I also have supply Q, but I don't have equations, I just have ordered pairs. So I'm going to put my P, my prices in 0.5 and 0.75 and 0.62 and 0.46, and then my demand quantities, 0.5 goes with 500 and 0.75 goes with 385, and my supply quantities, 600 goes with 0.62, 285 goes with 0.46. And remember, Excel understands that that's my independent variable, and this is one equation and this is another equation. So I'm just going to grab the three columns and insert a scatter with markers only. And so what you get are these two blue points, which are my demand points, and I would hover over them and make sure that's right. And my red points are my supply points, and they are also correct. And so what we want to do here is something new. We're going to create or find the equations by finding a trend line. So what you want to do is you right click on a point, and this dialog box opens up, and you want to click on Add Trend Line. And then this dialog box opens up, and there's just 2 points, so there's no doubt it's going to be linear. And then you want to click the box Display Equation on the chart, and I always click the second box, the R-squared value. But since it's 2 points, it's pretty obvious that's a perfect fit, so your R-squared value is going to be 1. And so you have y equals negative 460x plus 730. Well, we've defined our independent variable to be p, so you can come in here if you want. This is just to make it look pretty, but you can change x to p, and you can change y to q, or if I want to remind you, this is the demand equation, so I could call this d of p and remember that that's q. Okay. Then I'm going to create my supply equation by clicking on the point, right click on a red point, add a trend line, display equation on the chart, display the R-squared value on the chart, and this is my supply equation. So my independent variable, instead of x, we've called it p. Instead of y, this is s of p. This is my quantity of supply. So now I have equations, and so now I'm back to where I was in the other example, and you can use these columns. You can keep the columns or you can redo it. I'm going to redo it because why not? We can keep practicing. These are the 4 columns you need for market equilibrium. I have a good idea of what my price range is, so I'm going to start at 0 and count by 0.2s, and I can change that if I want. My demand equation is right here, and it is negative 460 times P plus 730. My supply equation is 1968.7 times P minus 620.63. My difference column is going to be cell C15 minus B15, and I'm going to select these 3 cells and then drag it down, fill up this with the new formula, and so now I can grab these 2 and count by 0.2s. And I know I have plenty because I went from negative to positive, so I don't need all this. I'm going to delete some of that. Okay, so now I'm going to find the market equilibrium price by dragging this down one more time. And then I'm going to click on cell D21, that's my difference column, and that cell is going to go to 0. So I'm going to go to Data, What If Analysis, Goal Seek. To value, I want that difference column to change to 0 by changing my independent variable P, which is at where the 2 is. And there we have it. So we know we should charge about 56 cents, and when we do that we're going to sell 474.19. Alright, then the next question is, if the quantity is 300 chocolate bars, will there be a shortage or a surplus? Okay, so I'm going to drag this down one more time, and we're going to assume that this quantity is 300. That we're going to assume that that's the demand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this demand queue right here, this column, and I'm going to goal seek it to 300. And by changing, this is my dependent variable. My independent variable again is this P. I'm going to click on it, and there we go. So if my demand is 300, that must mean that the price was 93 cents, and there's much more in supply than in demand, so this would be a surplus. Okay, so for example 4, you should read it and try it and then check your answers, and so I'm going to let you do that. And then let's talk about what you got. So you probably let P be your independent variable. So you should have gotten a price of $5.98. We round it to the hundredths place since it's money, and 220.75 caps. But I did want to mention something, and that is you could switch the independent and dependent variables. So I wanted to show you that it doesn't matter. You just have to make note of it. You have to mind your P's and Q's. So when you read the problem, Q is quantity and P is price, you could set up the ordered pairs as Q comma P. And so that's going to switch the ordered pairs around. And so when you put it in your table, you're not going to have price here. You would have quantity as your independent variable, and demand price and supply price. And you would get a graph, and the equations would be different. Let me show you what you would get. Okay, sorry about that. You would get these equations here, and they look very much different than what we got when we let P be independent. But I put the equations in here. So my demand equation goes here, and my supply equation went here, and I goal seeked the difference to 0, and you can see I got the same answer. So we have a price of $5.98 here, price in the second column $5.98. We have a quantity of 220.75 caps here. You have 225.05 caps here. Now this gives me a chance to say this is not a problem. This is a goal seek issue. So here when you goal seek to 0, it stopped at 0 and everything is great. But again, Excel, it starts looking and looking and looking and looking, and it's got a tolerance level. This number right here, negative 2.3 e to the negative 13, means 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 2, 3. That's what that number right there means. And so it's Excel saying, hey, that's close enough to 0. Give me a break. So you're going to have goal seek issues where sometimes your answers are just a little bit off. And maybe I can count on my hand 5 times in WebAssign. You might get a little annoyed by that. So just be aware of that. And if it's on a test, of course, I know how to grade that with a little bit of tolerance for the value. But goal seek, that doesn't present a problem. Goal seek is going to stop searching when it gets close enough to 0. And so that's what's happening there. So you can see you got the same answer whether you let price be independent or you let quantity be independent. So I know most of you are going to want to pick price being independent, but I did want to show you that you could do it either way. Okay, so our last example, I'm not going to go through it with you. You're welcome to try it. There is a trick here. This first part says the equilibrium point of a certain good is 575, 120.25, and so the equilibrium point is a point that is on both lines, and so that's the trick to it. So if I click on the key, it says by reading the entire problem, we can infer that price is P, Q is quantity, have been given to us as P comma Q. So again, you have to think about what you're going to let be your independent variable and what you're going to let be your dependent variable. So P comma Q is the way I'm going to go with this. And so my demand points, this 575, 120.25 is an equilibrium point. So that means it's on my demand equation. And then I have another point, 180, 238. And then the supply points, again, this 575, 120.25 is the market equilibrium, so it is a point on the supply equation. And then I have another point, 180, 740. So that's the key to this one, is you had to remember that the equilibrium point is a point on both lines, and then it becomes the same as the other two examples that we've looked at. Okay, so that's where I'll stop. If you want some extra practice on supply and demand and market equilibrium and surplus and shortage, you can go to section 1.2 in your textbook, numbers 37 through 42.